Number one, like I said, the brain loves to learn about itself. You've actually given the brain a little bit of a gift. Even just by getting a little bit of an understanding about how it gets triggered, it actually causes it to catch itself much more readily. So it's a very clever brain. What we're learning about neuroplasticity is the more that we can educate the brain about the brain itself, the faster it changes. And it's got an extraordinary amount of intelligence if you can just give it a little bit of help. It loves to learn about itself. The functional MRI that we're using left, right, and center is giving us terrific maps of at least the activity and where the activity starts to happen. So we're beginning to at least map what goes on and off in reaction to different things. We can see that one of the great studies that was done by Professor Davidson at the University of Wisconsin, who actually worked with one of our great teachers in Buddhist philosophy, Matthieu Ricard, and many other monks, to look at what's the difference between activity in the brain of a monk that's been meditating for years and years compared to a brain in the activity of just a normal person like you and I. And there's significant difference in the activity of those brains. There's significant differences in the ability to stay calm and create and innovate. And that's fundamentally interesting to us. So we know where things happen. We actually know where we set goals. We decide, we predict, we sense, we plan, we communicate, imagine, feel, think, reflect, act, prioritize. We don't know exactly how it works, but we're beginning to see locations of different types of activity. And it reflects in behavior. And why I'm doing this is I'm beginning to show, we're starting to, in leadership development and culture, trying to understand how the underlying brain, heart, gut functions can be translated to behavior. We're never, I mean, I don't know if we're going to do it in my lifetime, but we're at least starting to understand where do we get visionary, original, mindful, expressive, embraces change, fair, determined, diligent, tolerant. I don't know. I don't think we'll be able to put somebody in a functional MRI in my lifetime and exactly map that like the old phrenologists used to map in the 19th century, but perhaps in the next generation they will. And that'll be an interesting time. Instead of IQ tests that we currently give our incoming executives, we can just stick them in a functional MRI and check out their brain. And don't laugh, because if anybody's interested, it's not happening in corporate life and government life yet, but it is, there are clinics now that you can actually start to see your brain. One of them is Daniel Amen's clinics in the United States, so you can actually go for, $3,000, look at your brain. You can start to see what impact even injuries that you had when you fell on your head when you were 3 years old. You can see the impact of that. I'm most interested about it is how we actually start to address it and correct it to make great leaders and great cultures and great organizations. The leader, now this is what's going to be interesting to me as I watch the cultures and I watch the performance of our organizations. And I think the leader who's in the highest health of mental fitness and performance will succeed. And mental doesn't mean just this. It means this, and it means this, and it means this. It's clear to us through all the science that the body and the brain are not separate. You might have been able to tell that already, I don't know. But we are no longer just knowledge workers. We are creator workers. Creator workers need this. And this is going to be fundamentally important. When I think of leadership, somebody says, what is leadership to you? I say, here's the Japanese proverb, strategy without execution is a daydream, right? Yeah? Execution without strategy is a nightmare. Either without a way to collaborate and build a team can't exist, and a team can't exist without each person being really fundamentally clear why they're there. So those are the four components of leadership I always think about. I always think about strategy, execution, collaboration, bringing a team together, and I always think about then some of what you guys have started to talk about, which is who is the person that's actually being the leader? And I think the model that we've looked at and tried to link a lot of the neuroscience studies, and not only neuroscience, but gut, heart work, it shows this. So when we say performance, it's the I quadrant. How can the performance of the body-mind really fundamentally work? And we really look at all kinds of aspects in this quadrant. We are starting, I think a great leadership program will actually involve sleep scientists, gut scientists, movement scientists, breathing physiologists, and a whole bunch of other work to get us to a place where, whilst we may not be ready for the Olympics, we're going to be great leaders in every aspect, both in the office and at home. And I think that's a really important aspect.
Why do our best ideas come precisely when we least expect it? Maybe when we're in the shower or while you're driving. So it's one of these intriguing things. Is this intelligence always there, or does it come out of the ether from out of nowhere? So this is one of the questions that I try to answer. The brain is a very expensive structure to run. Even at rest, it uses 20% of our metabolic energy. And this is 10 times more than what it should be given its weight. It only weighs 2% of the body mass. So what is the brain doing? The brain is very peculiar as an organ because, unlike the body, it has this ability to time travel. It can project back in time to moments we hold dear. It can also project forward in time and bring our dreams to life. And what happens in illness, for example, is when our brains are chronically displaced back in time, we face depression. And when we are chronically displaced too far forward in time, then we suffer from anxiety. So these are some of the mechanisms that are often seen in the brain. The body, however, cannot do this. It cannot time travel. The only place that it can stay is in this moment. And what you find that, unlike the brain, which creates this ecosystem of realities, the body only functions under two modes. That is the survival mode, as Catherine had mentioned, and the parasympathetic, which is when we are in a relaxed state. And what is becoming more and more familiar to us is that it is not just the brain that is regulating the body, it is the body that is also regulating the brain. And in fact, the 10th cranial nerve, which is the vagus nerve descending from the brainstem down into the body, that nerve has a lot of information going up to the brain. In fact, 90% of the information traveling in the vagus nerve is going up into the brain. So, in fact, this is what I mean by the brain is rooted in the spinal cord. This is our grounding. And this communication between brain and body can be measured. It is something we call vagal tone. The strength of this vagal tone is a measure of how well the body is communicating with the brain. And it's been shown that high vagal tone has been associated with stress management and emotion regulation and so forth. But low vagal tone has been associated with illnesses, for example, mental, physical, and physiological illnesses. The way to increase vagal tone is through breath. And the reason being is because our breathing is directly connected to our hearts. Every time we inhale, our heart rate rises. And every time we exhale, the heart rate slows down. And this is what gives rise to the heart rate variability that we see. Now we have biofeedback technology called Fitbits and so forth that measure this heart rate variability, and it's a measure of the communication between brain and body. So knowing that the inhale increases the heart rate and the exhale decreases the heart rate, we can capitalize on this. And many cultures have done this in the past, but as a general rule, all we need to do is prolong the exhale, perhaps make it twice as long as the inhale. And by doing so, we relax the nervous system. We use the exhale to relax the body. And once the body is relaxed, then we have access to this intelligence, these possibilities that arise. This intelligence that I'm talking about, this body intelligence, is only accessible in this moment. We often find our thinking patterns are fairly explicit. We use time-based thinking, we plan, we use strategies, and so forth. And these are helpful, yet we live in an ecosystem that, as Catherine described as VUCA, it's volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. And so in this environment, we need a system that is not so cognitively heavy on strategic thinking and planning, but more responsive to the moment. And this intelligence is implicit. The implicit intelligence is strategy-free and also operates from a time-free space. It's the intelligence of this moment.